Welcome to Soul Care, a moment in your week to focus on something spiritual that will perhaps give you a little meaning for your day. Many people have talked to me during this COVID time, and those who are extroverts have said to me that this is a time when it feels like being in hell. Well, the introverts don't talk as much, but I wonder, do the introverts during COVID feel like they are in heaven? Most of us know whether we are extroverts or introverts. Some of us might be sort of in between, right at the cusp of the difference, or maybe sometimes we're one and sometimes another, or maybe at some point in our lives we've been more extroverted or more introverted. I know that when I first took the Myers-Briggs personality assessment some years ago, I came out strongly as an extrovert, and that made sense to me because I like to be in groups, I like to talk to people, I like to be in relationship, and I find I charge up my battery when I'm with friends. But more recently, I've learned to appreciate time alone, quiet time. And especially during seminary and in ministry, I was a teacher before, and being a teacher is kind of an extroverted activity, but being a minister has a lot of study time included. And in seminary, I would really love those days when all afternoon and all evening I would spend in the library with a big stack of books at my desk with uninterrupted time and quiet. It was very nice. Many of the students lived on campus, and we all could use the dining hall, whether we were commuter students or not. And when I would go into the dining hall, I would get my food in the cafeteria line, and then I would stand there awkwardly wondering, well, where shall I sit? And, everybody was friendly in seminary and would have included me readily, but I felt awkward, like I was barging in to conversations of people who were roommates, perhaps, or very close friends. And so I didn't really like to sit down. It would have been fine to eat alone, but I didn't want to be seen eating alone. So sometimes I would just take the food and take it out and go to a park and sit alone on a bench. When I was in high school, I remember, it's funny how you remember the difficult memories over many years' time, but I can remember being assigned to a lunch period at Berkeley High School where I attended, where they had many lunch periods, about 3 or 4 in the day. And I had a lunch period with not one of my friends. And this was a big disappointment. So that whole semester, at the beginning of the lunch hour, I would go to the restroom and comb my hair and organize my things and take up some time. And then I would go to the snack bar. And, most people would go to the shortest line. I always went to the longest line so that it would take up more of those minutes of my lunch hour when I didn't want to be standing there by myself. So I worked my way through the line and got some food, and then I would go around the back of the cafeteria building where there was nobody. And I would stand and lean against the wall of the cafeteria building and looking straight out through the chain link fence that separated the campus from the streets of Berkeley. There I'd eat my lunch by myself. It was pretty sad. I felt sad about my situation, but I just didn't know how to initiate anything else. It was awkward. We live in a culture where we're expected to be social. We're expected to have friends and engage with them, to talk and laugh it up. A few years ago, I discovered the book with the title Quiet by Susan Cain. It discusses what it's like to be an introvert in a culture of extroverts. The full title of the book is Quiet, semicolon, or colon, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. to be an extrovert right now in this COVID time might be hell. But I have to say, to be an introvert is not exactly heaven. You could probably say you are an introvert if you prefer time to yourself, if you are drained by social interactions, if you prefer to work alone, if you prefer a small, close circle of friends, if you're introspective and curious, if you're accused sometimes of zoning out when you're around other people, or if you don't seem to feel as happy as others appear to be, maybe then you are an introvert. If you live alone or just with one partner and you are an introvert, you may like this sheltered in place time a lot. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to be social. You can go to church without dealing with that painful passing of the peace time and without having to make conversation at the coffee hour after worship. You can simply sit there alone with your computer and feel like you've been to church. It's pretty comfortable to work from home if you're an introvert. You don't have to chat with your office mates. You don't have to deal with all that talk around you at your normal work site. You can do your work in quiet. What a privilege. Without all that yakety yak around you, you can get a lot more done. You can be creative. And you don't have to deal with interruptions. But if you are an introvert and you have a family, it could be very hard for you right now. Let's say you and your spouse are working from home and your children are distance learning from home also, which means you have to supervise their work. You are pulled back and forth between your children and you feel like you cannot concentrate on your own work. It's frustrating. You can't escape and go to the office. Now you're in the thick of noise and disruptions and demands on your time, day in and day out, through the week and even on the weekend, all day and even into the evening. I was part of a Zoom meeting recently with ministers who are all working from home, and one of the participants has two special needs children who are in elementary school and working from home as he is working from home. And during this call, it was so frustrating for this colleague of mine. I really felt sorry for him. He had to keep muting himself and turning off his camera and not able to participate in our meeting, which was one that required conversation, because he had to keep attending to his children's needs. He felt very bad about it. It didn't matter to us, but he felt very pulled back and forth and unable to concentrate. This gave me tremendous sympathy for working parents working from home with children attending school online. Well, what can we do about this? If you live with an introvert and you have children, perhaps you can figure out a way for your introverted spouse to have a little time of quiet each day. I know for me, an extrovert living with my husband, an introvert, I really try not to interrupt him when he's reading or thinking. It's hard because I want to blurt out something when I think of it. But I try to save up my topics for when we're having a meal together or taking a walk together and talk then and not at other times. If you are the introvert, you may need to ask for quiet space and time in your day and ask that you really be alone. If on one weekend you're very busy socially, perhaps you can ask that the next weekend would be a quiet weekend with time home alone, with peace and quiet and no plans. If you have children, you'll have to talk this over with your spouse. If you have a spouse, I really feel for single parents now, because if you are a single parent working from home with children doing their school from home, you may never be alone. You may not have any time to yourself, and that may be very difficult. Partners who are opposites might be able to create a good balance between one being extroverted and one being introverted to compensate for each other and to help each other out. Or sometimes opposites are not a good thing, and people resent the other for being different. I often think about Mary and Martha in the Bible. Remember them? This is in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." Sometimes we don't like to hear that Jesus took a side in this story. Who was the extrovert? Martha. And who was the introvert? Mary. And Jesus says, Mary has chosen the better part, which cannot be taken away from her. Let's embrace quiet times. Whether you are an extrovert or an introvert, we all need some quiet space. It gives us time to think, time to feel, time to listen, time to pray. Find some quiet in your day today. Stay well and take care of your soul.